Hello vinyl community, how you doing? Hope you're all well. Today I'm going to show another bunch of obscure hard and heavy albums of the 1970s. The last video seemed to go down well, so why not? Yeah, another 6 to show today. I'll probably do another video on this theme after this one as well, at least one more to be honest. So let's get started. And first off, I'm going to show you a soundtrack. This came out in 1978. It was an Australian mockumentary, the film the soundtrack came from. Predated Spinal Tap, and I've never seen it, but I can imagine it has quite a lot in common. Somewhere up here I'll stick the poster for the reissued DVD of it, which, the graphic just gives you an idea of what it's about. Perhaps the sleeve will as well. It's by an American band called Sorcery, and the film was called Stunt Rock. And you can kind of see some stills from the film there, which give you an idea of what you're looking at. It's kind of $6 Million Man, Charlie's Angels, 18 kind of quality of drama by the looks of it. This was directed by a guy called Brian Trashard Smith, I think his name is, who described this film as the worst film he ever made. So don't expect too much of it if you see it. I don't know whether you can get it on YouTube. I'm going to have to check that for myself because I do fancy enduring it for a while. But the music is great. I think the premise of this movie was that this band, Sorcery, employed a stuntman to try and spice up their live shows. And that's kind of all there is to it. It's the dramas that unfold while all these stunts are going wrong and that kind of thing, I suppose. I think the band did perform with a couple of magicians on stage, which just made for a slightly interesting spectacle anyway. And apparently Foreigner were approached to play the band in the film. And I think they'd have done it, but their tour commitments clashed with the filming schedule, so they didn't do it. How history could have changed for them if they'd been involved in this film, may never have been seen or heard of again. Musically, I really enjoy this. I mean, it's pretty camp and tongue-in-cheek, whether it's meant to be, I couldn't tell you. But it sounds like, to me, a cross between Blue Oyster Cult, The Sweet, Spinal Tap, inevitably, Black Widow, and any number of sort of also-ran new wave of British heavy metal bands you can think of. There's some searing guitar on here, some great ridiculous helium vocals in places, loads of squelchy analog synths and some Hammond organ underpinning the guitar riffs. It's really good stuff. Like I say, it is really tongue-in-cheek. It does sound like a kind of a tongue-in-cheek Blue Oyster Cult with some sort of cod satanic incantations in places. I mean, the first track, Sacrifice, fantastic. Really enjoy that one. That one very much reminds me of Blue Oyster Cult. Second track, Wizard's Council, has a ridiculous cod satanic voiceover at the start. They get all sensitive on the Bird song. Bit of acoustic guitar. Slight change of mood there. And elsewhere, I mean, the final track, Power Mad, just has these ridiculous fizzing, squelching analog synths on it, and it's superb. Mark of the Beast, track Mark of the Beast, and the title alone tells you, what you're letting yourself in for, and that is very Spinal Tap. It features a one finger bass line on that, and again, some great synths, some great guitar, some histrionic dramatic vocals, and I can thoroughly recommend this album. This is an original 1978 Dutch pressing, which came on the Groovy label. It is quite difficult to track down. I think it's been reissued, perhaps only on a picture disc. I'm not sure. I could be wrong about that, but I wouldn't be interested in the picture disc. I'm sure the quality of that's not too great, but this is a really good album. You can stream it. I'll be listening to it on Spotify as well, and it's well worth checking out. So Sorcery, Stunt Rock. And next up is an album that I've been singing the praises of for, well, I picked it up about 35, getting on for 40 years ago probably. And I love it. And I don't understand why it gets so little love and why the lead singer is treated as a bit of a joke, because I think he's got a fantastic voice and he's been involved in some great projects. And I'm talking about Detective, which was a vehicle for Michael Des Barres, later married to Pamela Des Barres, the famous groupie. And he was in Silverhead earlier in his career, who were also a great hard rock band. Well, certainly had their moments. He took over from Robert Palmer in the Power Station. He was in Checkered Past with a bunch of old punks. And he's got a great, gravelly, proper rock and roll voice. And joining him on this album and their follow-up album are Michael Monach, who was the guitar player on Steppenwolf's first 3 albums, and Tony Kaye, who, of course, was the keyboard player on the early Yes albums and went on to play in Flash and Badger. And this is a fantastic album. It's show you this. It's there's the inner sleeve, which I think is rather nice, all black, just with the Detective logo in the corner. And it's on the Swan Song label. And that should give you a clue as to what it sounds like, because this album is definitely one for Led Zeppelin fans. It's not an out and out clone of Led Zeppelin, but the sound is definitely there. Particularly the drum sound. I mean, at times you'd swear it was John Bonham playing the drums on here. The drum sound is just so massive on this album. So what does it sound like? It's not just Led Zeppelin. There's a lot of other influences at play here. Certainly the first track, Recognition, it starts off and it's all Led Zepp kind of swagger. Clean, funky guitar, that gravelly Michael Des Barres voice on there, Bonham-esque drums, and there's kind of a reggae swing to the riff on this. And Michael Des Barres stops just short of falling into kind of a mock Jamaican accent. But there's definitely a reggae vibe to it. If you can imagine Led Zeppelin playing reggae, you probably don't have to if you've ever heard Dread Zeppelin. But yeah, it's definitely got that kind of feel to it. But they get away with it. It doesn't sound contrived in any way. It's superb. Second track, Got Enough Love. Again, a ton of Zeppelin swagger on there. There's some subtle horns and sax going on underneath all the riffing as well, but it's definitely not a horn rock record. They are subtle and they add rather than take away from the overall sound of this record. The third track, Grim Reaper, what a track. It's another sort of stuttering Zeppelin-esque riff. There's a kind of synth wash in the midsection, which is kind of adds an air of menace as well, and that is a great track. Final track on side 1, Nightingale, is a kind of light as in the air ballad moment, but then it goes double speed towards the end and you get a real great shuffle drum beat, so that's a bit interesting as well, a bit special. Side 2 starts off with the track Detective Man, which probably owes more to Deep Purple in its sound, to be honest. There's some sort of honky-tonk piano on there, but it's definitely a Deep Purple-esque riff. Ain't None of Your Business, second track on side 2. Bit of a bluesy brooder. Big power chords and a pissed off vocal. And then it goes a bit weird. Third track on side 2. And it's the only track that really kind of sticks out a bit, not quite fitting in. It's called Deep Down. And they go all sort of Jeff Beck jazz rock fusion on that one. Beautifully played. Great listening experience, but it doesn't quite fit with the rest of the album. Wild Hot Summer Nights is another great Zeppelin-esque riff, but it sounds like Led Zeppelin jamming with James Brown. It is a funky track and a real highlight of this album. So do yourself a favour if you see this and pick it up. There's a band on the back. I've loved this album for so many years. The second album's a really good listen as well, but this probably edges it for me. So yeah, Detective with Michael Dobar. Really good stuff. And here's a classic from 1974. I don't think I've seen anyone feature this on the VC before. And it's time it was shown. Great album. Spoiled Rotten by Left End. My copy, yeah, it's got a fair bit of ring wear and corner cut and all the usual signs of a hard life, but plays like a champ. So I have no complaints there. And I think it's a pretty hard album to track down these days. So in any condition, you got to get it. Yeah, like I say, it came out in 74, which was kind of the height of Slade and Gary Glitter and The Sweet and all those bands being around. And I think that UK glam rock influence was definitely felt on this band. I mean, just look at the guy sat here in his sort of silver lame suit. I mean, that combined with this guy's kind of leather cut off and Tony Iommi moustache gives you an idea of the sound. It's a heavy rock album with a definite glam stomp element to it. I mean, the first track, Loser, it sounds like Slade doing a Who impersonation. There's loads of trebly up-front bass, clattering drums, a guitar riff that sounds like a fire alarm, and this vocal, it's like a cross between Noddy Holder and Roger Daltrey. Absolutely classic stuff. Then they go into a track called Bad Talking Lady, which is it's kind of a glammy cowbell stomper. Really good stuff, some really good heavy party rock. And then the title track, Spoiled Rotten, kind of sounds like a Wishbone Ash riff. But if you could imagine a Wishbone Ash riff with a kind of Aerosmith groove, Steven Tyler, Dan McCafferty from Nazareth type vocal, it's really good. This whole album is really, really worth checking out. Then I suppose the highlight on the second side is the track Taking Time, which starts with jingling bells and gentle acoustic guitar. Then it launches into this kind of glam stomping take on a Black Sabbath riff, and it gets pretty wild from there on in, and there's just this insane wild guitar solo to end the song. It's really good stuff, really worth checking out. And yeah, it's difficult to pick highlights because the whole album is so good. I mean, it finishes off with a track called It's Over, which has a real choppy stop-start riff, a wailing whiskey-soaked vocal, and some sweet harmonies and wah-wah guitar, and yeah, superb. So Nazareth, Slade, Aerosmith, The Who, they're your kind of reference points for this album. But it is really worth picking up if you do see it. Really great album. Left End. Now, loads of you will be familiar with Captain Beyond's debut album. It's a classic of the genre and one of my favourites of all time. But they did put out 2 other albums during their fairly short lifetime. The second, Sufficiently Breathless, is probably my least favourite, even though it features Rod Evans on vocals. And the guy that replaced him, Willie D, or Willie Daffern, which was his real name, I think has a fantastic voice. He went on to play in Gary Moore's G-Force. He played in Truck, T-R-U-K, Truck, and Pipeline with Tim Bogert from Vanilla Fudge. So the guy's been around a fair bit. Fantastic set of pipes. And you've still got Larry Rhino Reinhardt on guitar. And you know my love of promo and press photos. There's a photo of him playing with Captain Beyond as a recent pickup. Very pleased to have got that. But this is the third album, Dawn Explosion. And some reviewers really write this off. They say there's no hint of the original Captain Beyond sound on here. It's too commercial sounding. Rubbish. It still has enough of the Captain Beyond sound of the debut to draw me in, that's for sure. And yes, it is more commercial, but who's to say they wouldn't have gone in that direction with Rod Evans on vocals anyway. I love this album, and it's fantastic. And it starts with an absolute banger, Do or Die, which is like commercial southern hard rock with a superb vocal. Great drums, wailing lead guitar. Really is a spectacular track. And no, that doesn't sound a lot like the darkly, almost psychedelic jamming stoner feel of the first Captain Beyond, but in its own right, it's a great hard rock tune. And this is a great hard rock album. Second track, Icarus, has a real seductive, slinky bass line. It's soulful, it's bluesy, has a mellow, funky vibe. And yeah, it's kind of, that does hark back to the slightly progressive feel of the first album. So that's one you should check out if you want that link to the past. And elsewhere, you've got a track like Fantasy, which has a riff which really sounds like something that could have come from Ted Nugent's self-titled solo debut album. Absolutely love that track. It's a real southern style banger of a tune. At times, Willie DeFern sounds like a sort of harder edged Steve Perry from Journey, which I know is going to put some people off, but I think Steve Perry's got a great voice, and Willie D's not exactly the same, but he does have that purity of tone to his voice. He really does. Side 2 starts off with a two-parter called Breath of Fire, which is sort of a glossier take on some of the material you'd find on the debut. So, and the fact it's a longer track in two parts gives that sort of a feel, because the debut definitely had those heavy progressive elements. The track If You Please almost has a riff that sounds like a reworking of the Beatles' Ticket to Ride riff. Again, has that sort of jammy feel to it. Really good stuff. Midnight Memories might be a bit mellow for some people, but it is a great ballad. Really good stuff. And the final track, Oblivion, is a wild instrumental jam. Has a sort of hard rock fusion feel. And I mean, I almost forgot to mention Bobby Caldwell's drumming on here is incredible, but I love the guy's drumming. He plays everything on this, from hard rock to jazz fusion grooves, and he's incredible. This whole album is really, really good. So don't be put off by the naysayers. It is really worth picking up. Love it. Next up's a band that I've only ever featured on my channel once before, and that was just to take the piss out of their terrible sleeve art. But that wasn't this album. That was an album they did called Ta-Da. And this is their amazing Strikes album. It's Thunder Mug. And they were a Canadian band. This album came out in 1972. And it's sort of characterised by full-on fuzz and quirkiness. The first track, Africa, kind of has a Bo Diddley, that's something, a Bo Diddley tom-tom beat. There's humour there. They even play the kazoo on that track. And that is a track that a lot of people slate this album for and can't really get beyond that. I'm fine with it. It's entertaining. It's pretty brief. And even if it wasn't, it's a decent track. And I like the quirkiness of it. They then go into a three-part track. The three parts being Page 125, What Would You Do, and Help Father Son. Fantastic sort of trio of songs. The bass playing is worthy of John Entwistle. There's metallic, heavy guitar on here. Really raunchy vocals. It absolutely kicks ass. The dynamic sort of switch between heavy and poppy. Absolutely love it. And the drummer is a monster. I mean, throughout the album he's a monster, but on that trio of tracks he's incredible. In fact, they're all brilliant musicians. I wonder if living out in the wilds of Canada I forget which part of Kansas they come from, but perhaps the winters get pretty severe and they have an awful lot of time to shut themselves away and rehearse. I mean, there's the band there. I don't know whether you can tell. I kind of caught in a snowstorm in that photo shoot. They look pretty badass, don't they? It's a great album. You've got some Hendrix-like acid guitar on here. There's loads of that John Entwistle style bass, like I say. They do a fairly faithful cover of The Kinks' You Really Got Me, first track on the B-side. And it's good, but is it really necessary? Probably not. I'd rather have heard one of their own songs in its place. Second track on side 2, their Fortune's Umbrella, is great. So woozy, dreamy, trippy, almost ballad, but it has a real Bowie feel to the backing vocals, these la 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 backing vocals, and some really nice dynamics. Very different tune. Like I say, these guys are quirky. This is a heavy album, but not afraid to explore other sounds within that heavy sort of framework. And the final track on here, which is called Where Am I, sounds like an 80s sort of bluesy metal tune, well ahead of its time. Big chorus, wailing guitar, the drummers going for it. It sounds like it's building a shed. And it's sort of an a cappella breakdown at one point before they just batter us into submission with some more heaviness towards the end. This is a brilliant album. Definitely need to check this one out if you see it. It's an original Canadian pressing. Came on the Axe label. And yeah, if you fail to check them out after I showed their To Dart album before, you need to check them out now, because this is some good stuff. And finally, an album from 1979, so just gets into the decade we're talking about, and it's Nick Simper's Fandango and his Slipstreaming album. And Nick Simper, of course, was the bass player in the first lineup of Deep Purple with Rod Evans, later of Captain Beyond. And this is a worthy album. It's hard rock with a fair bit of melodic stylings on here. There's some kind of Blackmore-esque guitar, I guess. The vocals are reminiscent of Dan McCafferty from Nazareth at times. The singer is a guy called Jim Proops, and he was, along with Simper, they were both in Warhorse. So some good pedigree there. There's guys on the back. Be warned, there are some boogie stylings on here though. The track Rocky Road Blues, it's kind of, it's a nice hard boogie number, but it's a cross between early boogie era Status Quo and Nazareth. And you get a bit of that as well on Independent Man, the third track, which has that kind of Foghat style strutting boogie groove to it. It's good stuff. I'll put here that it's kind of almost sounds like a heavier Creedence Clearwater Revival, that track, so if that floats your boat, you should check it out. The title track, Slipstreaming, almost has a cock rock feel to it. You know, it has metallic guitar, drives along. Really good track, real quality stuff. Schoolhouse Party, second track on side 2, has a great bass line. Again, groovy, solid boogie number, tasty guitar, tight as hell. I could almost imagine Susie Quattro doing a cover of that one. So I'm making this sound light, more lightweight than it is. It is a pretty heavy album, and definitely worth a listen. There's a couple of slightly mediocre tracks on side 2 in Sister and Mississippi Lady, but the final track, Time Will Tell, is Nick Simper telling us all about how the music industry has screwed him over. And it starts off fairly sort of laid back and acoustic, almost like an Elton John number. But then it heavies up and you get some really tasty guitar on it. And it's, you know, lyrically, it just really hits home how he felt like the music industry had, you know, dealt him a bad hand. So yeah, that one's worth giving a listen. It's a really decent album. I don't see this one talked about much either. And as far as ex-Deep Purple members go, you did a good job here. Okay, so that's the latest 6 of the best. I'm going to do another one of these, at least one more of these, because I've got quite a few more to get through. Hope you're enjoying these, and I'll see you soon. Take care.